Well, let's start. I think it's time. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Emmanuel Mounier, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this new webinar organized by EU Travel Tech within the series Travel Your Way on the Sustainable Travel Forum. So, who are we? EU Travel Tech is the organization representing in Brussels the travel tech industry. That will be the global distribution systems, the online travel agencies, the meta search engines, the travel management companies, which all together are powering the travel distribution industry in Europe. And we have organized this series of webinars in order to discuss a series of issues which all have one common feature. They look at how travel tech can make travel more sustainable. And today, I am very happy to have a great range of guests, of speakers, to discuss sustainable accommodation, how to make accommodation more sustainable thanks to technology. And we will have this meeting hosted by Dave Keating that I will pass the floor to in 1 minute. But before, let me announce you already the last webinar of our series, which will take place on June 25. It will be dedicated to rail distribution. The title will be Unleashing Rail Distribution to Make Rail Travel More Attractive. And we are very excited to have also this event in 1 month. So we hope to have as many of you as possible in this event. So thanks a lot. Have a good morning. And now over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Emmanuel, and welcome everyone. Nice to see you again for this edition of the Travel Your Way series, where we're going to be focusing on accommodation. We're going to be talking about a new way of sustainable tourism in the accommodation sector with more transparency about environmental impact. My name is Dave Keating. I'm a journalist based in Brussels, and I'm going to be guiding us through today's conversation. Now, today we're going to be looking at ideas for making accommodation more sustainable, making its climate impact more transparent to customers, and seeing how providers, how different aggregators can work with accommodation providers to get that information to consumers. We'll obviously be talking about what impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on European tourism's sustainability agenda and whether the summer boom that's needed for the industry to recover would be contrary to those goals. More than anything, we'll be looking at the role that online travel platforms can play in supporting informed consumer choices and promoting responsible and sustainable travel. I'd like to first introduce our keynote speech. That is from Luís Araújo, President of Turismo de Portugal, which currently holds the rotating EU presidency. Luís, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, David, and good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much to EU Travel Tech for the invitation. And I'll try to be very brief because I think we should privilege the discussion afterwards. I'm here to share a little bit our experience in Portugal as a national tourism office, and especially during these 6 months of discussion in the presidency of the EU, and the lessons and the challenges that we faced and we still face for the future, and hopefully get some answers. And this is a critical time, especially because we had the wonderful news a few days ago that tourism, we would have a European tourism agenda for 2030, 2050, which is something that we rely on and we think will be a very positive thing for our sector, but also not only for our sector, but also for the planet. In 2017, in Portugal, we launched a strategy for the next 10 years. A strategy with a clear commitment and clear goals in terms of sustainability. And goals, we wanted to grow, we still want to grow until 2027 economically, but we want to grow with a balance between social and environmental sustainability. And this has been very clear. We have very ambitious goals. I won't bother you with that. But it brought us 3 big lessons. The first one, and I think that was the first lesson, was that we always have to put people first. This is the first issue with sustainability. If we put people first, the locals, the workers, people that work in tourism, and of course the tourists, we will always have sustainability and a more sustainable activity in the end. And we want locals to recognize tourism as a big activity and as a positive activity for their lives and for the territory. We want workers to be prepared for a more resilient tourism, but also a more sustainable one. And of course, we want tourists to have the best experience ever. The second lesson with this strategy was that sustainability cannot be seen as an imposition, as a penalty to any company or to any person. It has to be seen as an added value. And it has to be seen as an added value to my business, to my country, to the planet. If we don't put this on top of the agenda, then sustainability will be the last thing people will worry with. And the third thing, especially after these very troubled things of 2020, we have to accelerate sustainability. And here tourism can be an example. We believe that tourism can be a force for good. We cannot take the role of being either the victims or the villains of this movie. We can do and take action in our hands to improve the sustainability in our sector. And we don't have to be the first ones to be accused of the climate change, of the over-tourism, of the ecosystem destruction. In some cases, we can take action in our hands. These were the three main lessons, or the three biggest lessons of these 3 years of sustainability strategy in Portugal. And we've accomplished a lot during these 3 years, but we still have a lot to do. And I would like to leave the three biggest challenges that I think we all face, and I think we will discuss during this webinar. The first one has to do with technology. Technology is the best friend of sustainability, and we have to take this for granted and recognize it, because this will only be the way. We're not in opposite sides, we're in the same and common track. And by technology, I mean data. We need more information, clearer information. We need more data from many resources and many sources to take the best decisions, to use less resources, to have more efficient and more efficient systems in our businesses and in our lives. And finally, technology will help us in better communication. And it's not just a matter of communicating better, it's a matter of giving information to people in order for them to take better decisions. The second one, and the second biggest challenge, is innovation. Innovation and entrepreneurship is crucial for the sustainability of the ecosystem in any business. And together with the innovation and entrepreneurship, we need more flexibility and more speed in accelerating sustainability. I will give you just one brief example. Bringing tourism and health together is crucial, not only because of the new demands of the new customers, but especially because what we have experienced over the past year will be with us for the future. And this is crucial for us. We need to make or build a bridge between tourism and health in order to have more efficient answers for the future. The third one is a very simple one, and it's my last one. It has to do with responsibility. Sustainability, it's not just on the hands of the public sector. It's not just on the hands of the big corporations, and it's not surely in the hands of very small hotels. It's in the hands of everyone. It's in the hands of consumers, and that's why I'm also always talking about clear and transparent communication. It forces us to change the attitude and the mindset of any tourist, because they can make a change. We can make a change if we choose sustainability. And by choosing, I mean choosing products, choosing destinations, choosing places that support sustainability. I talk, of course, about the workers, and we need to give them training. I'll give you a very small example. In 2020, we gave online training to more than 80,000 people in Portugal. And we had different kinds of online training. The most successful ones and the ones that had more people were the ones about sustainability. And this was for us mind-blowing. And we had from digital to revenue management to any issue related with, of course, accommodation, but with tourism. Sustainability is on the top of the agenda. People want to be prepared, and we have to give them the tools to be prepared. The third one, and the third area of responsibility, of course, has to do with public institutions. And I'm glad to say that we're doing a tremendous effort to promote sustainability and to guide companies and workers and locals in the sustainability path, but we need to do more. And one very small example, now that we're talking about accommodation, a 5-star hotel can no longer be a 5-star hotel if they don't have principles of accommodation, of sustainability. We cannot classify 5 stars or 4 stars or whatever it is just because they have slippers inside their room or they have reception 24 hours a day. It's not possible. And this has to be an European movement. It's not only Portugal, we're changing the regulations in order to include that kind of subjects, but this has to be an entire European movement to change the perception that the rules that guide our accommodation right now are no longer the rules that we had 20 or 30 years ago. And of course, regarding the public institutions, and I'm really happy to see Valentina here and so many speakers with so many, and Claudia with so many responsibilities inside the European Union. We need very clear funding and direct funding that accesses everyone. We can no longer have this misperception, and I know we've changed a lot over the past years, but funding is for everyone and everyone can access that. It's not just, you don't need to hire big experts or big corporations to get funding from the EU or from public funding and in any state to access sustainability and to change your business. And I go to the 4th part of responsibility, businesses. And I see many businesses here, especially OTAs, in this panel too. In some cases, small and medium enterprises do a much better job than big corporations, than big hotel chains. They just don't have the ability to put their word out. And this is crucial right now for our sector. We need to give everyone the same space in terms of public hearing. And we need to commit, and I say this sometimes, big companies should focus more on committing with clear goals in terms of sustainability than what they do. It's not just about reducing single-use plastics. It's about giving locals and giving workers conditions so that they grow in this sector. And once and for all, we consider this a force for good. As we say in Portugal, and just to finish, we need a better tourism if we want a better planet. This is our commitment inside the Portuguese presidency during these 6 months, and these were the discussions we had in the several meetings we had. But I think this is something we all have to take care of, and we all have to lead by example. So thank you once again very much for the invitation, and glad to ask any question.
Thanks a lot, Luis. That's quite interesting, this idea of linking the star rating system to sustainability. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that in the discussion. I was also interested to hear that, that the most popular trainings that you're doing are in sustainability. I think that signals a real interest from the accommodation industry. So now let's turn to the panel. Before I introduce them, let me tell you guys at home what your role is going to be here. You guys are kind of part of the panel as well, because you can ask your questions to the panelists using the Q&A feature on your Zoom screen. Just go ahead and type your question into the Q&A box. It would be great if you can say your name and your organization as well, although you're free to ask anonymously if you wish. And I will read out those questions to the panelists at the end of the session. You can also ask questions to Luis. I think he's able to stick around for the Q&A. So go ahead and type those questions in whenever you like, starting from now. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our panelists now. We're very privileged to have with us Valentina Superti, Director of the European Commission's Directorate for Tourism and Proximity, Claudio Montero de Aguiar, Member of the European Parliament, Marianne Giebels, Sustainability Director for Booking.com, Jean-Philippe Monod, Vice President for Government and Corporate Affairs at Expedia, and Madhu Rajesh, Chief Executive Officer for the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance. Welcome everybody to today's panel. I'd like to start with an opening question for each of you to kind of get your main thoughts on the topic. So Valentina, let's turn to you first, since you're in the best position to tell us, what has the EU done to encourage sustainable accommodation?
Good morning, Dave and all, and thank you very much for your kind invitation. Now, as you know, the tourism ecosystem is a quite diversified one, and certainly accommodation is one of the main components, but it's not the only one. So that's my first point, that sustainability should be looked at the, as a whole and not just per single component. Perhaps just a word on the shorter term. Of course, we know that the tourism ecosystem, unfortunately, is one of the ecosystem's actually the most hit by the COVID-related crisis, which has meant for us that we have been very, very busy in trying to restore it and restore travel as quickly as possible. And of course, starting with the vaccination campaign, but also, for example, by introducing the COVID-19 certificate for traveling freely inside the EU, just to make a couple of examples. But then my second point is that at the same time, it is clear that we should be looking forward. And here is the link with the sustainability, and think already now of the tourism of the future. And indeed, what we are observing is a trend towards a more sustainable, but also digital, this was mentioned also by Luis, and resilient tourism. So a tourism ecosystem which is better prepared to face any possible future crisis. And indeed, this was also mentioned by Luis, we now want to work together. And this is another key point, so the co-creation point. We want to work together with all the relevant stakeholders for an agenda for tourism for the future. 2030, 2050 are the ambitions in terms of timing. Now, in terms of themes and linking in with the sustainability discussion, I see a number of relevant points. And I would like to actually us to remember and to have in mind that more than half of the national recovery plans and of the current multi-annual financial framework, more than half are to be devoted to sustainability and digitalization. And this also links to the funding point made by Luis. So the themes, well, accommodation also means buildings. So one of the things that we are working on is on a renovation wave, which is meant to substantially renovate also tourism accommodation, which is, let's remember that buildings are responsible for 40% of greenhouse emissions as of today. So that's the first strand. The second strand, of course, is more sustainable means of transport. I will not go into that, but clearly this is also important for a more sustainable tourism ecosystem in the end. But then thirdly, the digitalization. Indeed, technology can help sustainability. And I have here in mind, we have here in mind, especially the many SMEs, small companies, which are operating in the tourism ecosystem and which are not, up to date in terms of digitalization. Fourth, linked to digitalization, there is the whole issue of data. This was also mentioned by Luis. The sector as a whole, including accommodation, needs to have more data. Why? To be able to drive the sector more strategically. Let's think, for example, of the management of tourism flows, just to make an example. That will be possible when data will be available. Fifth theme, the people, the workers, the skills. So we are working for a shared pact for skills, which is meant to identify, together with all the relevant stakeholders, what are the needs, what are the shortages, and what are the actions needed for upskilling and reskilling. We know that every change means also a change of competencies. So I suggest to leave it here for the moment. I hope I outlined some of the points that we believe are important in order to support a more sustainable tourism ecosystem, including accommodation. And we are very keen to work with all the stakeholders in the months to come. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Valentina. Claudia, let's turn to you next to get kind of the European Parliament perspective. Of course, we've spoken so far about the need for sustainability and accommodation, but maybe we should take a step back. I mean, why is sustainable accommodation important in your view?
Well, good morning to everyone. Let me just thanks for the invitation for being here with you. It was a pleasure to hear the introduction from Luis Araújo, and also this point that Valentina mentioned in her introduction too. And thank you, Dave, for your question. Well, sustainability and sustainable accommodation. Just to share with the people that are listening to us, the European Green Deal is the vision of the Union for the climate neutral continent. It will be an objective until 2050. Well, it is the bridge between the economy and the planet, and it is the path for changing consume and production patterns. It was also said by my previous colleagues from the panel. So therefore, we believe that it's critical to work closely with citizens and the industry. The Green Deal roadmap in all different ecosystems works only with this participation, with the participation of everyone, decision makers, stakeholders, and civil society. The EU climate legislation will touch upon the hospitality sector, including accommodation. In the report where I was responsible in the European Parliament, establishing an EU strategy for sustainable tourism, we have highlighted two critical points that could help the decision makers to act. The first one, it is obvious that tourism and travel industry, as Valentina said, we need also to look at travel and transports, but as any other economic activity, this industry creates ecological footprint worldwide. Well, this needs to be accountable. This needs to be accountable to act wisely. Therefore, there is a need to acknowledge exactly the percentage of emissions of the sector. We don't just say that there's a huge emission of gases and then we don't know the percentage and we don't know to quantify. And the other point is the lack of accurate quantitative and qualitative metric data, that it was also mentioned, the importance of data to understand the effect of tourism on sustainability. That can also help the decision maker, not only for private actors, but also for public actors. So based on these two premises, I have suggested the following in our report that I think that it fits here. First, develop a roadmap for sustainable tourism that can include these innovative measures to reduce the climate and the environmental footprint of the sector. Then put into operation the existing European tourism indicator systems, the so-called ETIs, in line with the UNWTO indicators for sustainable tourism. UNWTO statistic framework for measure the sustainability of tourism. These indicators are crucial to understand. There is a need to equip ETIs with a permanent governance, which can include static indicators and real-time data for management and evaluation of the progress. ETIs should be used as a scoreboard to monitor the economic, social, and environmental impact of tourism. The third point that I wanted to share with you is the examination of the barriers to obtaining the eco label and to expand its scope for other tourism services as a complement to the EU Eco Management and Audit Scheme, EMAS, for tourism. And fourth, the reassumption of works of the Tourism Sustainability Group. This group can serve as a reference to a European network of stakeholders in the area of sustainable tourism, that is, presenting new tools and initiatives in parallel with ETIs governance. So all of this should be put in practice with a proper framework composed not only by technical knowledge, but also proper funding. As it was previously said, Luis also spoke about the need of funding. We are asking for funding some years ago for the industry and all the participations of the stakeholders. So there's why that I also believe that the creation of an European agency for tourism is the governance that it's needed to put in place for all those requirements. The EU will have an overall target of at least 30%, as Valentina said, 30% of total amount of the EU budget and next generation EU expenditures supporting climate objectives. So we have to be sure that part of this amount goes strictly and directly to initiatives on the accommodation sector to help on this transition. And just to finalize, there is also the European Bauhaus initiative, a co-creation platform for a platform of architects, engineers, and designers to launch the architectural style of our times, reflecting the EU aspirations for the first climate neutral continent. So here I see so many examples on hospitality sector and an opportunity to mix synergies between these different sectors. And just to finalize, as Luis said, we need to put people first. So our citizens first, our travelers first. And if they are asking for a change, we have to stand by them and to prepare the answers that we need to give to them, taking into account this double transition that will take that is taking place, the transition on sustainability and the transition on digitalization.
Thanks very much. Let's turn to the platforms next. Marianne from Booking.com, I'll turn to you first. What are platforms doing right now to encourage sustainable accommodation?
Thank you for that question, Dave. And it's, I think, a really interesting follow-up on the speakers before me. Because as a matchmaker for supply and demand on the side of tourism accommodation, Booking.com can and wants to play a really strong role in incentivizing both consumers and accommodation providers to make more sustainable choices. Put it very simply, we want to stimulate both the demand and the supply side. And the clear challenge lies in reconciling the sustainability goals with where many consumers and our accommodations stand today. To put it out there, less than 1% of our accommodations today is actually certified according to any type of green certification standards, not even talking about an EU label yet. So that is such a small group. And sustainable accommodations need to be way more integrated into the offer itself. So it needs to go mainstream, because it cannot be that only accommodations that brand themselves as eco or certified are the ones that are going to be booked by tourists, because we have so many different platforms on a platform today, different accommodations on a platform today. And the good news is that we see really positive outlook. There are more and more conscious travelers. We see the attitude of travelers go towards sustainable tourism being very positive, and our accommodations are very eager to improve their green footprint. So they're very eager to work on this. They are entrepreneurs from the start. They want to improve their business. They want to get it right. But the main question is, how can we speed this process up without leaving anyone behind? And that's the core of the work that we are focusing on, our investments on at Booking.com. We have identified that we can play a role in making sustainability more accessible to increase both supply and demand. So what does that mean in practice? For accommodations, we want to make sure that we incentivize all our accommodation partners to adopt green practices. Sustainability does not need to be for only a few. It needs to be attainable at a broad scale. And accommodation partners are very knowledgeable when it comes to sustainability, and they have multiple practices in place, and some even hold that sustainable certification already. But the majority of our partners are at an earlier stage in their journey, and sometimes simply don't know where to start. In order for us to not leave the small accommodations behind, we need to adjust the system on how we measure them and how we support them. These small accommodations make up the backbone of our European tourism economy. So we have to focus on them. So what we did is we developed a framework that's more accessible to the small players out there. And we leverage an infrastructure by rewarding accommodations that have gone the extra mile to become certified. So we do recognize that, but also we aim to help the majority of our accommodations who are just searching for the first way to start. They're early on in their journey, but they also want to be recognized for their efforts. So what our model does is we're allowing the small, medium enterprises and partners to have the opportunity to market their sustainability efforts, no matter how small, because we're all in this journey together. And it cannot be that you only get recognized for these efforts if you've done it the right way, you get certified, you've gone through the whole process, and there you are as a sustainable accommodations. But you want to recognize your journey, because we believe that creates a solid foundation so that all accommodations can start engaging with the sustainable practices. So this can be small green choices like waste management, water consumption, but even as simple as the single-use plastics option and getting rid of that. By offering a space for showing these individual efforts on our platform, we hope to encourage the cycle and the race to the top. So the more sustainable options there are to choose from, the more customers will have to choose to book, and inspire our partners to continue to become more sustainable in their operations as they see the consumer demand and the benefits of that grow. And towards consumers, we continue to face the classical attitude and behavioral gap. We have a very positive attitude towards sustainable tourism, but when it comes to behavior, you do see customers choosing differently. They choose value, price, location over sustainability, which I think is a very human thing to do. But what can we do to support them? And I think there the key to this whole dilemma lies. It's increasing that amount of sustainable supply. So to Louise's point in the beginning, that sustainability really becomes a value add. And it's not something that they specifically have to search for or have to choose from. It's something that they can see as an additional value to their trip. This is all have to do with informing our consumers better. They don't want to dig deep to really find out what each label means or what a specific accommodation is doing. They want to understand that they make a good choice. So for any accommodation or eco-label out there, it's necessary to speak to a global consumer base. They don't want to dig deep, but they just want to understand in an easy and acceptable way that whatever accommodations they're choosing is a good choice. And it can be good choice by small efforts and small impact, and it can be a better choice by an even bigger impact. But what we feel that we need to do is start to recognize the small efforts as well, and make sure to communicate that in an easy, understandable way towards consumers. And this is not something that Booking can do alone. This is something that we need to do with the industry together. So we are working very hard with the industry to get this recognized. For example, one of our partners is the Alliance, and we'll speak later and share more about her point of view, but also within our Travelers Coalition, where we actually work with our partners and with our other platforms out there to follow the same methodology. Ultimately, we just want to make sure that, including existing accommodations, consumers have easy access to meaningful information that works when booking an accommodation in Italy, as well as it does when booking accommodation in Brazil. It sounds simple. We know it's a long way to go, but it's all about a matter of starting to recognize those small steps and supporting our small and medium business partners on their journey.
Thanks a lot, Marianne. Let's turn to Jean-Philippe. What is Expedia doing to encourage sustainable accommodation?
Hi, thank you for the introduction of all the previous speakers. So in terms of what Expedia Group is doing, let me echo the points made before about the fact that this has to be an action that we take together. I think the key point is here, it's a multi-year effort, but it also requires small steps to be taken. And I think that is the key also already highlighted by Marianne, we need to make sure that we are not leaving the small players behind while the larger players are able to invest in certification. So what is Expedia Group doing? Some years ago, 2 years ago, we started a partnership with UNESCO to look at how can we focus on the smaller hotels. And this partnership started in the APAC region as a main tourist destination for European travelers, where evidence showed that a lot of the single-use plastics there was actually most of the single-use plastics ending up in the seas were actually in Asia. So that's where we started. Together with UNESCO, this was a partnership in Thailand. We grew that partnership, and then we have now made it global. The partnership being rolling out a label for all hotels that have investments in sustainability related to single-use plastics, but also growing investment in local economy. So I think it's important that we look at sustainability not only in terms of the fact that it takes away the single-use plastics, but also, and this was a really important point for UNESCO, that we make it sustainable in order to have also local economies actually then benefit from it. So the local entrepreneurs being able to support the tourism industry, investing and buying local products, supporting indeed that there's also not a lot of transport of all products going to that specific tourist destination, and by buying locally. And so the combination of that led to our partnership with UNESCO. And I think the challenge that we were facing was exactly what's been also highlighted by earlier speakers. How do you make sure that you have the smaller players not feeling that it's too overwhelming to actually join a scheme and get certified and then just give up in the process? So we really wanted to get these smaller players in, making small steps. So any hotel that wants to sign up to the UNESCO Sustainability Pledge can do so, and anybody can then be visible if they've done so with those efforts on our sites, and consumers can choose those properties. We're equally working with other partners, like the larger hotel chains. Example is Accor hotels, who have their own program, but where we say, okay, we think that it is important to make sure that their own programs at a certain level. So all the hotels that meet a certain level of sustainability efforts will be automatically then recognized by UNESCO as meeting the Sustainability Pledge requirements. And so we are growing the program and wanting to make this more and more visible. So what can we do? Just separating it in the supply side and the demand side. On the supply side, it is making sure that there's a high enough threshold, but a low enough threshold at the same time to join, and to work with the existing organizations that are out there, like working together with the European Commission on the eco label, and making sure that the different labels, that there's so many different labels that are out there, are more visible to consumers. So what we say, okay, we have the UNESCO Sustainability Pledge, we look at the different labels, but consumers can choose those sustainable hotels. And then if they want to know more, they can find in the attributes of the specific hotel the different things that they actually do, as well as the different certifications that they actually have. So had to make it also easier for the hotels to participate, and as well for the traveler to find that information. In terms of the supply side, we also want to make sure, and this was mentioned by various speakers in terms of the incentivization of the hotels. We want to participate in trainings. We have a website which has testimonials of hotels who have already joined the UNESCO Sustainability Pledge, that it is not a zero-sum game. I think that, and this is really important for hotels to see, that actually investing in sustainability is ultimately not a cost, but can be actually a benefit. Of course, there are certain investments you need to make upfront, but if you look at, take a simple point about getting rid of single-use plastics, we've got a couple of videos on the website of hotel owners that describe what they've done, where it actually has been able to reduce their investments, their costs in running their business. So becoming greener does not automatically mean that everything's more expensive. Actually, there are lots and lots of examples of people that were able to achieve a cost reduction, and those stories have to be told, and that training is important. Sharing these experiences of hotels that have gone down this path is really important. And then on the demand side, obviously where we can play a role as platforms then is to make sure that all of that information is visible, that consumers can easily choose, that there's transparency. And my feeling is that with the crisis that we are currently going through as industry, as world, with Corona, with the COVID-19 infections, while we are hopefully getting out of this soon, you will see a move of travelers that are also environmentally conscious, and that automatically means that there's pressure, and now there is very little demand for the hotels, and that's growing soon, and then it will be competition between the hotels. And so I think, and that's what we've been discussing with our partners, this is the time, right now is the time to do something around sustainability and make these investments, because at a certain point then consumers, then when they're all traveling again, would like to have that additional choice, right? And it is, of course, there is competition on price and on the facilities and on the fact of consumers whether have good reviews, etc. But at a certain point, when a lot of them are on the market again, it is that additional angle that may tip the balance, and that is a sustainability choice. And I think therefore hotels that invest in this now are able to really benefit from that once the market recovers, because consumers have shown already in different research that they find this important, and sustainability investments are therefore sustainability investments are investments that are paying back, and that are not only doing the right thing, but are economically also the right thing to do. And we want to make that insightful for our travelers. And we therefore it's great that we have this webinar today to show that that there is investment of platforms on this. We can only do this if we do this together, make this insightful, and try to help consumers find the right information when they make their choices in the coming months, when hopefully the market recovers.
Thanks. I mean, I think that's an interesting point about this not being a zero-sum game, and that really goes to the question of hesitancy to make these investments and whether hotels think that they would lose a competitive edge if they did. Madhu, let's turn to you. Tell us about what the Alliance is doing to encourage sustainable accommodation.
Thank you. It's been great listening to some of the viewpoints that have been shared by panelists before me, and actually I think what the Alliance is doing speaks very well to what has been highlighted here. Certainly in the last few months, over the past year, we have seen an increased focus on sustainability and consumer focus on sustainability, and sustainability-led decisions, purchasing decisions will certainly accelerate the pace of progress. It's been great to see the platforms as well as corporate travel buyers put a focus on sustainability as well, and again, the demand side contributes to the actions from the supply side. So, you know, hopefully that will all come together as we aim to come out of the pandemic. The Sustainable Hospitality Alliance has been around for more than 2 decades and essentially works with the industry to help different players at different stages move along in their sustainability journey. We work with some of the leading brands. At the moment, we've got 13 hotel companies as our members that represent about 25% of the industry. And that gives us unique insights into where the industry is at, what are the key issues, what are some of the solutions, what works, what doesn't work. Our members are of different scale, different sizes, different ownership structures, and present in different geographies. And that gives us that in-depth understanding. We then, with that support, aim to address the multiple barriers when it comes to sustainability, be that, you know, people have spoken about the business case. Absolutely, we help to build the business case for action because it is absolutely not a zero-sum game. And we produce research which shows if you think of a hotel, both in terms of the asset as well as operational sustainability, there is a business case which sort of lends itself a commercial angle to progressing on sustainability. The second thing we try and do is simplify sustainability. So there's been a lot of conversation on helping consumers and customers make better buying decisions. Sustainability is complex and it means different things when it comes to different geographies, different sizes of accommodations, and different levels. There was a point made about star rating, different levels of hotel accommodations as well. So we try and help create awareness on what exactly does sustainability mean in the context of different hotels, so that people can ask the right questions, and that helps then benchmark apples against apples and communicate that with consumers so that they can make better purchasing decisions as well. That being said, hotels are at different stages of their journey, and someone said earlier that many of the larger brands are doing a lot when it comes to progressing on the sustainability agenda. Absolutely, and there are equally smaller independent hotels that are just getting started on their sustainability journey, and it can all be quite overwhelming. So we are a friend, a critical friend. We challenge the industry to do more, but we equally are there to support them at every stage of their journey, regardless of where they are, to walk the journey with them. And we do that by creating a number of tools and resources, be that tools that help them measure their water footprint, their environmental footprint, focus on how they hire ethically, because modern slavery in labor supply chains is a big issue of our times, and we need to address that. Or look at how they engage positively in their communities, because overall what we want to do is for every hotel to engage positively with their communities and have a positive impact on our planet and its people. So that's what we try and do through our different tools and resources that we create. And in that, we of course partner. Booking.com is here, and I've spoken about our partnership, and that's a key part of the work that we do in terms of looking at how do we work with partners, be that government partners, not-for-profit partners, private sector partners, to help any hotel that wants to take action on sustainability progress more and bring the demand and supply side of the equation together.
Thanks a lot. So I have some questions for the panelists myself, and just a reminder, you guys at home can ask your questions by using the Q&A feature in Zoom. I want to first address the elephant in the room, which is COVID. Valentina, let me ask you about this first, because I know you have to leave shortly. I know that the Commission is doing everything it can to help the tourism and hospitality sector, and there's a lot of talk about a big bounce back needed this summer in order for those industries to recoup their losses losses during the pandemic. And I think that's particularly true for the accommodation industry. So how do you think that need for rapidly increasing volumes for a bounce back can be done sustainably?
Well, you know, indeed, the immediate first priority is to bounce back, to allow the tourism sector as a whole and the accommodation sector included to start again. So it's about restarting, and at the same time. And you know, this is very interesting because it's not just a lip service, but any crisis is an accelerator of trends and is an opportunity. So we are working on the two strands at the same time, meaning that we are working for increasing the chances for the tourism sector to operate again, while at the same time starting a conversation for the immediate future, which has to be also a more sustainable future. And there is so much to be done. We could discuss for hours. Now, the very short term, as you know, we have been very active in terms of a vaccination campaign. So there was some difficulties at the beginning. Now we are really catching up, and that I would say is the first element to start again. So vaccination, and then facilitating. So we are doing all what is possible to facilitate travel again. Meaning within the EU, and there will be a new tool operational as of 1st of July, but also by loosening restrictions for third country nationals to be able to come into the EU. We know that the first three third countries generating tourism in Europe are China, the US, and Russia, and we think that with the easier conditions that will be put in place, there will be again a flow from these countries, and we have also some surveys which point to that direction. So I would say this is essentially what we are doing to improve to maximize, let's say, the chances for the tourism ecosystem to thrive again as of this summer already.
Marianne, I imagine that platforms also need to make back some lost revenue from the pandemic, and that it's also very important to platforms that we get back on our feet here. So how do you think that can be done sustainably?
If it's a really good question, and of course not an easy one to solve, but I think there are three things that happened during the pandemic that actually speak to a more sustainable travel industry. So sort of the good things that the pandemic brought. What we see from research is that our consumers are now more aware, what COVID has brought them is that they're more aware about the human impact of travel. That they understand that not only, of course, the negative sides to the environment of travel they're very aware of, but also the positive sides. They also seen the local economy struggling for not having tourists, seeing those great communities having to find new livelihoods from being originally having their livelihoods from tourism. So people understand very much the impact that their travel has and the positive impact that their trip can make. The second thing is people very much discovered traveling locally. Who hasn't now rediscovered their own country as a place of to celebrate your holidays with? So we hope that stays, because as you can imagine, the sustainability element of that is very strong. And third, I think the wish for people to travel is always there, but maybe also this pandemic has showed them that there are more destinations to discover. So So traveling off the beaten path, we hope that remains a trend that continues even after pandemic. So we do not have the data to back it up yet, but I hope in a year's time that we will be able to tell you that the actual behavior and the trends of travel have shifted a little bit towards more local, more often beaten path, and with a strong focus on the impact of travel.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that people have discovered new destinations. I know that I for sure I've done more traveling within Belgium than I ever have before. And I've realized, why wasn't I doing this before? There's some really amazing places that are just a train ride away. And I always used to think, oh, these are just day trips because Belgium is so small. But now I take the time to stay at a hotel and actually really enjoy the place I'm going to. It's, I think, for speaking for myself, it's something I'd like to continue. Madhu, I wonder, you were talking about how you're working with the hotel industry. You don't want to be seen as like lecturing them, that this is an opportunity for them. But I imagine that at this time, when the accommodation sector is hurting from the pandemic, it's a harder case to make, right? To get them to make these investments when they're feeling very anxious about their own economic future. How do you make that case at a time like this?
Absolutely. I mean, the hospitality industry has been very badly impacted by the pandemic. There is no doubt about that. We know that. But I think it's also a very committed industry. And from my perspective, working as closely with the brands as I do, and actually having been on a journey where we launched our organization following a demerger in the middle of the pandemic, that was a very strong signal that the industry's come together and said, we actually want to do more around sustainability. We recognize that actually this is the direction of travel. We have been doing a lot over the last 2 decades, and we want to amplify our action on it. So I think I want to mention that, because that is a case in point about how committed the industry and some of the big brands are to their sustainability agenda. I think there's a couple of things I would say. Beyond doubt, there is a need to do more with less, and that's not just for the hospitality industry, that's across the board. So hopefully that will resonate, and that's why there is a need to not reinvent the wheel. What we've seen is, because of the increased awareness of sustainability, everybody's talking about it. And I feel there's a need to just pause and think about what already exists and how do we build on that rather than reinvent the wheel. So for example, in our work, we have great tools for carbon and water measurement. And they're used by about 25,000 hotels globally. And we have seen them work with hotels as small as 4-room hotels and some of the largest hotels and independent hotels as well as large chains. So that's an existing tool that's there. It's absolutely free to use. Hotels can download it and use, their engineering teams can use it. So I feel there's a need to look at what's already been created, raise awareness around it, and promote their usage rather than go back and reinvent the wheel, because that's only going to put us back. It's not going to help us move forward. So that's certainly one thing which I would say. I think the other element when it comes to the business case, people know that there are financial gains to be had, and we've shown that. We partnered with the International Finance Corporation to build a business case, not just for the hotel operators, but for asset owners and investors, to take them on the journey, because very often sustainability is associated with the logo that is there outside a hotel. But actually, if the building's not built right, no matter what you do operationally, you will never reach the levels of sustainability that you can if you integrate it right from the design stage of a hotel. So there is a need to educate people there and work across the value chain and look at what is the right point and what is the right thing to do early on, and educate investors that many of these additional investments actually have short payback periods. We've seen some payback periods are as low as 1 week. And overall, over the life cycle of the asset, it adds value and you recover your investment and you generate returns on it. So there's a big need for an education piece there, which I feel we can focus our energies on. And then looking at it as collaborators, because the appetite is there, because especially independent hotels are struggling because they would want to bring back consumers to the hotels, and they will have to do that on a shoestring budget. How do we assist them? How do we be that ally that meets them where they are, whether they're getting started, whether they're advanced? create a forum for the sharing of knowledge and best practices so that they know how it's been done before. And I think that's where, you know, the role of players that can help take them on the journey with them, you know, take them along and understand that real progress will happen faster if we move along together. So collaborative action and the role that has to play in sustainability, I think recognizing that is going to be quite critical.
I wanted to come back to this point that Luis made in his presentation about linking the star rating system to sustainability. That was quite interesting to me because I wonder, you know, so far I think we've been talking about those consumers that want this information, right? And we've been talking about this as a kind of separate ranking for a more environmentally minded consumer. And I wonder if it might annoy another type of consumer, another type of traveler that really just wants the star rating system to be about the poshest treatment, the most comfort, the best service. And if that star rating system was being skewed by environmental performance, in other words, if a hotel that didn't have the slippers in the room, didn't have all of the luxuries, was able to outperform a hotel that does, simply because they have maybe environmental performance that a customer doesn't actually feel in terms of their visit. I wonder if that would annoy people. Jean-Philippe, what do you think about that? Do you think that linking the overall star system to sustainability is a good idea?
Well, I think that if you do this overnight, clearly this is not going to make the difference if you do not look at this more holistically. I think the issue with the star rankings is that a lot of systems are national, right? So if you make these changes to a 5-star in one country, but you don't make it transparent to a consumer, he doesn't know, right? So the consumers are in a way conditioned in a little bit to think along the star rankings and that they have certain minimum requirements. If you, however, are able to combine these criteria more holistically by having this discussion on a European level or ideally on a global level and making changes to the fact that you should be able to expect from a 5-star hotel that they make these investments, right? I think the issue here is not whether it is that you make that change, but that you make it in a way that consumers can actually see it. And I think that is where it requires more discussion, more European or a global approach to making changes to star rankings. Because I don't think that there is a concern of changing the requirements for a 5-star hotel to make them more sustainable in the criteria. Where I think the problem lies is that if you do that only in one country but not in the other, and we are on our sites showing just star ranking without the explanation, then the investment go lost, right? Or the insights are lost. The consumer, I want to make sure that the consumer sees when they make a choice for a sustainable hotel. So I say my view is that it's not something that I would say, well, it doesn't work. I say it will work if you make it more broad and make it transparent.
Claudia, what do you think about this idea? I mean, as Jean-Philippe was mentioning, I guess it's already probably kind of complicated to aggregate all of these different star reviews and have a harmonized approach. What do you think about the idea of linking the star system to sustainability?
Well, Dave, that sentence that you said is the sentence that I'm used to hear. That is difficult. I don't know if that will be possible to do, because we have 27 member states, and as Jean-Philippe said, this issue of the stars of the ranking is a national system. So that is why when in the first discussions that we have in the European Parliament within the Tourism Task Force, that was one of our ideas. I think that we should we could harmonize. I don't say if we have 10 metrics, but if you could have 5 metrics that can be common to all the European citizens, this transparency, this data transparency, these requirements could be more easily perceptioned from the side of the consumer. So I totally agree, and I pointed out as one of my to-dos to start pushing it again to the discussion, because I do believe that this could be one add-on, as Luis said in the beginning, to create the value added, not to add value to something. So this could be the moment for SMEs, hotels, restaurants, all the chain, all the value chain, to make this this step, or to accelerate this change that needs to be done. And if in between all the changes that are being done, you have something regarding the sustainability that can help you in the end with the consumer to choose you, because you have this thing that differentiates you from the other, it will be positive. We need to discuss it at the European level. We need to push also to the European institutions to understand that sometimes there are more positive things of having common rules, as it happened with the certificate of COVID-19. In the beginning, it was a monster because it was talked about as a passport, because it will discriminate people. If you do it in the right pattern, in the right way, with the red lines, but saying what is the purpose too, and having common rules, this could facilitate. And the tourist industry has other things, like, for instance, this ranking that could also be better coordinated between member states.
Luis, maybe I could have you react to that. I mean, how easy do you think it would be to link the STAR system to sustainability?
Yes, thank you so much. I was trying to raise my hand, but I thought I wasn't allowed to speak anymore. And I just wanted to be very clear. First, David, it's possible to have a 5-star hotel without sleepers in its room, or at least with different kind of sleepers. The sleepers is a stupid example, but it forces us to think. And I agree with Claudia. If we don't break the model and start thinking again, we will never do anything. And it's not a matter of a national regulation or an international regulation. It's once again finding our responsibilities. And I'm gonna put the finger on some responsibilities in this group, which I think it's crucial. And I agree, we need to harmonize, and consumers need to have a clear notion. And when we're talking about classification or stars, it's all about expectations. And there are some entities that have bigger power in terms of tourism and in terms of travel. And I'm looking at two of them here, Expedia and Booking. And it's also your responsibility to not only change the attitude of consumers by promoting more those who have sustainable practices, but also have a positive discrimination to those who apply them. Why not charging less commissions to those who comply with the requirements you establish? That would be the most efficient measure to promote sustainability on the offer side, not only on the demand side, because we're always saying that consumer this, consumer that, they can choose, they need clear information, but it's up to us too. And now I'm pointing the finger to you. Let's do an effort. Let's commit with this. And when we're talking about sustainability, I'm not saying that it's your example, but we forget about the social part. And this is crucial. We will never have a better planet and environmental sustainability if we keep having so many social problems as we have, even inside big corporations. 5% of the CEOs of the big companies in travel and tourism are women, only 5%. And 54% of women work in the tourism industry. their paying is less than men. So unless we address this and we say that we commit with clear goals for the future, and we push these clear goals, not only inside our sector, not only inside our company, but outside. And once again, I think many of us have a lot of power to do this, even financial power to do this, with what I said as positive discrimination, then we will have a better tourism for sure. Because if we're not all engaged on this, we won't push this forward.
Marianne, let me get you to respond to that. I mean, do platforms have an obligation to or a responsibility to nudge consumers in a certain direction?
Absolutely. So I don't think that Louise was pointing fingers.
I agree with the consumers, but you need to push also the suppliers.
Yes.
And we're
also
not
agree with you on that one. So I'm not here to argue against you, but what I do think is that what we need to keep in mind is that in order for us to start incentivizing our accommodations to show them better to our consumers, that scope of sustainable supply needs to grow. Because otherwise, if we do this now, we're gonna incentivize the big ones and leave the SMEs behind. So as long as we don't have a problem to solve for that gap and to show also the sustainability efforts of our smaller partners and smaller accommodations, there's no point in starting to incentivize the best ones in class, because we will be incentivizing essentially the big hotels over the small ones. And that's exactly not what we want to do. What we do need to do is make sure that sustainability flywheel starts to work, that with an increase of that sustainable supply, we provide our consumers with a bigger choice and a bigger supply, so that sustainability becomes a value add instead of a choice against price, etc. So I think you have a very strong point, and I think I have to agree with you. It's just solving that friction of getting that sustainable supply up and showing that to consumers in a consistent way is the first step. Once we have that amount of supply that's big enough for us to believe, and it makes a good part of our supply and our accommodation partners, then we can start to incentivize those even more.
That's an interesting point about the smaller partners. Madhu, what's your take on this? You're on mute. You're on mute, Madhu. There you go. You're off.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I think the platforms have actually got a bigger role to play in driving behavior change among consumers, because eventually the whole movement on sustainability will gain pace if we as consumers are willing to put our money where our mouth is. So if we can say ABC hotel is more sustainable than the one in next door to them, but it costs £5 extra a night, and giving consumers the nudge to pay that premium for a more sustainable hotel, that will incentivize and accelerate the pace of action as well. So we often talk about sustainability almost as if it's going to penalize people, either by giving them a lower ranking or cause some sort of disadvantage. And I think we need to probably look at a more positive spin on it. And each one of us as consumers have a role to play there. I think I really like the idea of stars, but I think we've got to be very pragmatic about it, because it should not be an additional green star or something like, there are lots of certifications and then everyone starts to spend a lot of time in demystifying that. I think looking at how do you create a simple and transparent mechanism that then helps people understand what we're looking at in terms of sustainability would be great. And I also feel some of the luxury hotels have examples of best in class. I mean, from our membership, for example, ITC Hotels is the world's first LEED zero carbon hotel. Soneva, again, doing great work when it comes to balancing luxury with sustainability. So they're not mutually exclusive. It's just that the awareness and education around them probably just needs to increase. My final point is, I will agree with Luis that the social element is absolutely important and it's very often forgotten. Before the pandemic, there was a huge amount of debate around over-tourism, and we've seen now the role that hotels play in their communities and providing that economic advantage or opportunity, especially for people who have low levels of skills and qualifications, and the role that hotels can play in doing that going forward, as we look to rebuild, is going to be even more enhanced. And I'm hearing a lot of debate around environmental sustainability, but the social side of things, whether that is looking at employment, skills development, diversity and equality and inclusion, or modern slavery, all of those are important issues, and we probably need to hear a lot more about that as we think about sustainability.
Jean-Philippe, what do you think? Do platforms have a responsibility to have this positive discrimination nudging consumers toward sustainability?
Well, absolutely. And I just wanted to respond to Luis that I totally agree with him, all of the points. And I hope that the fact that we have this webinar today shows the fact that it is high on our agenda as industry. We have worked already for a couple of years now with UNESCO. And obviously this is a first step, right? We need to make sure that consumers are able to see the hotels that are investing in this, and there is more to do in terms of education, and so we take this very seriously, that our market managers who interact with the hotels take this along and push the hotels to look at this, look at the investments, share the fact that it is indeed not a zero-sum game, that if you invest in it, that you can actually reduce cost. But at the same time, if we as platforms make this visible, and whether that is on a small platform or on a large platform, all of us should start to see that this is the trend of the industry. So whether you have the large chains, or you only have the independent hotels, I think what we need to make sure is that we make visible those hotels that make these investments. And I think that today we have all spoken about what we're doing and what we need to continue to do. You also mentioned some of the social points. Obviously, you can't just invest in visibility if you have to do things yourself. We as a company have been carbon neutral for now, I think 5 years, continue to do that. Need to make sure that also our supply chain, what we use in our offices, is not single-use plastics, etc. Of course, you have to, and you can't just say, okay, we're going to focus on the things that we show on our website. You have to speak. You have to do what you speak about, let's say. So we make these changes. And to the social points, that is a really important thing. We are focusing on that internally. We have somebody in our board at the moment, board member responsible for diversity, inclusion, and sustainability. And so it shows that we're not just having somebody somewhere in the organization. No, this is part of our board. It gets the priority of our CEO, who has, I can tell you, on our internal town halls, every town hall has been also an element of talking about how sustainability needs to play a role in growth for the future. And lastly, in terms of the definitely we are looking at mixing we just had a new senior person joining our board from in the US to change the balance a little bit more. We're not entirely at complete 50-50 in our board, but we are fairly close to it in terms of male female. So all of these things are important, and we want to also send that message that within the company. And in terms of the publications that we do, I think you may have worked with some of our colleagues of our media solutions teams, and how we want to grow the sustainability supply side by making that more visible. We want to grow the secondary destinations, and all of that campaigns in which we invest ourselves as well can be great tools to push people to these less visited places, to help them focus on sustainable hotels. So we really want to make sure that we can use the different tools that we have to drive this agenda. So again, just full support for your comments, and I think this is a start, and we just need to grow it.
Let me take a question from the audience because it's related to this point. This question comes from Ellison Fellers. The question is, when do you think we will see the transition of customers making active choices to book more sustainable accommodations? As mentioned previously, many customers like the idea of more sustainable choices, but often book with various factors like price as a higher priority. Do you really think people will prioritize sustainability over price? Or will this be a slow transition? Or should it in turn be the responsibility of the booking platforms to highlight the sustainable accommodation? Claudia, let me put that to you. When do you think we're going to see this inflection point where sustainability becomes more important than price? Or is it possible to ever reach that inflection point?
I don't know if it will be in the short term, because as we are discussing here, this needs to all stakeholders, to all value chain, to make some changes. So to make citizens or consumers take this action, you will need to give them something that they will say, okay, this was my choice, this was a good choice, and my expectations by choosing this are fulfilled for having chosen this point. So I think this is the moment of the transition. We are all focused on that. I think I see through this discussion that we are having here, from policymakers, decision makers, to people that are really in charge with the platforms and with the private sector. So this is the way, this is the path that we want to start implementing. If it's going to take 2 months, 6 months, 10 years, I don't know, but this needs to be the effort. This needs to be the practice that we need to take out from the discussion and put it in practice, and slowly changing this consumer path. Because if there's the need in the side of the consumer, so let's put it in the side of the offer of the supplier, the answer to that. And combining that, of course, you have it, the $1 billion question answered.
Marianne, when do you think we're going to reach this inflection point, if we ever will?
I don't think we ever will, Dave. I wish we were. I want to be that positive person that say at some point the power of the consumer is going to be so big that they start to show that choosing sustainable accommodation is all they do, and price and location don't matter anymore. I don't think we'll ever get to that point, but I also don't think we have to. So if we can provide our consumers with a range of big amount of sustainable supply that they continue to choose on price and location, and then sustainability comes in as a decision-making factor, that's then the point where the power of the consumer starts to kick in. So here you have two competitive hotels. They are doing both great jobs on price and location, but one has a higher sustainability rating than another. Then I hope that the consumer is smart enough to put their money where their mouth is and say that positive attitude that I have towards sustainable travel will translate in that more sustainable choice. But again, that sustainable supply needs to grow. With currently less than 1% of our total partner population, so we have around 2 million partners on our platform being certified, that needs to go up. So we need to start where accommodations currently at, hold their hands and help them to a more sustainable path. That is the only way to go, not focusing on the small group of consumers that's willing to book sustainability over price.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that it can work as kind of an extra incentive if you have two hotels that are the same price, but we're unlikely to get to a point where people are going to pay more for sustainability. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for a really interesting discussion. Lots to digest there. And I think it's also really encouraging to hear the areas of agreement between everyone in terms of this idea to highlight sustainable hotels, the role that the platforms have to play here. I think we definitely got buy-in from both of our platform representatives on that. So that's really encouraging to hear. So it sounds like there's a lot of work still to be done here, but it sounds like that work is being done. We're getting there slowly but surely. So thank you to all of our panelists for a great discussion. I want to tell you guys about our next panel in the Travel Your Way series. So that's going to be on June 25th at 10 a.m., as Emmanuel mentioned at the beginning. That is about unleashing rail distribution to make rail travel more attractive. So far as panelists, we have Jody Ford from Trainline, Christian Schmidt from the Land Transport Unit in the European Commission, and Christopher Irwin from the European Passengers Federation. And we'll get more people coming in on that panel. So I hope to see you guys all there on June 25th for the next version of our series. But for now, I wish you all a great rest of your day. Take care.